everybody. Welcome to the Philly Sports Convo. I'm Jason Lee. This is episode number 20. It's been a while. Took a little bit of a hiatus for the summer, so thank you for hanging in with us, and it's certainly good to be back. Before we get to our guest, who's a familiar face to a lot of you and a familiar face on this podcast, that's for sure. I want to take care of some business. We've got this great shop that's up and running on phillysportsconvo.com. So it's shop.phillysportsconvo.com. All sorts of great merch on there, shirts, so let's see, sweatshirts and sweatpants, all kinds of accessories. We got, tumblers and mugs and mouse pads and desk pads. There's even a throw blanket on there, right, Ethan? Throw blanket. Come on, at Philly Sports Convo throw blanket. So check it out, shop.phillysportsconvo.com. Also, if you're in the Bucks County area, specifically Warminster or Huntington Valley, so I'm doing 2 trivia nights a week for the rest of the summer. Tuesday night, our regular get-together at the Blue Bar on County Line Road. York Road, between Street Road and County Line Road in Warminster. And on Thursdays, at Pal's Tap House. That's on County Line Road in the Justa Farm Shopping Center. Both trivia nights are 7 to 9, so I hope you come on out. It's a lot of fun and some cool prizes, too. All right, let me get to our guest. This guy is like the hardest working guy I know. He's the host of Trending in the AM on the Edge of Philly Sports Network every weekday morning from 8 o'clock until 8 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. 90 minutes of great sports talk. And he also owns his own pizza shop in Kennett Square, Fox's Pizza Den. It is the great Beardaknowledge. It is Phil Stifel. Phil, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
I'm very, very appreciative that you thought of me to come on today to talk some Philly sports. You know, I was thinking about it. You know, the tagline for my show is "Where your opinions actually matter."
Indeed.
Nobody ever cares about my opinions except for when I get to guest appear on someone else's show. So it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's something different where I'm not asking the questions, I'm answering the questions. So I kind of like this little break from the norm.
Well, I'm going to give you a little pushback there, buddy, because I've watched your show, and it seems like you've cultivated a pretty nice size audience on your show. And if people didn't care about your opinion, that wouldn't be the case.
That's true. They just want to hear what my thoughts are on their opinions. I direct the start of the show. Today's show went so off topic. We were talking about the best buddy cop or duos in movie history. You know what I mean? So you just never know what you're going to get on my show. I just throw random ideas out there, mostly Philadelphia sports, sometimes movies, TV, music, and stuff like that. And where the conversation goes, it's whatever the people want.
Well, that's the beauty of what we do. You never know. And that's what's great about the art of conversation, Phil. And that's why I love conversation so much, and that's why I can't stand when I watch people, and you've seen people like this too, who just have bullet points, and they go down their bullet points, you know, question 1, question 2, question 3, without listening to what the guest is saying. You know, it's the art of conversation, and I think you're really good at that, man. And from what you're saying,
I won't lie, I used to do that when I first got started 4 or 5 years ago doing this. I type up a full agenda for every show, questions, answers, you know, pivot points and stuff like that. No. I think it's much more enjoyable for the listener and for the people that are paying attention and conversing to know that it could go in any direction. If I'm talking Eagles one day and somebody's got an Eagles or Phillies question, we can pivot to that. It doesn't matter. And you got to listen to what the people want. I think that's so key in all of sports conversation. It's just conversation in general. Businesses, like I listen to what my customers at my pizza shop, what they're telling me. I think it's so important to listen. It's a skill that not enough people have these days.
Yeah, you know, and I should listen to you from now on, and I should call or text you before I'm going to visit your pizza shop, because you are always there, except the one time I decide to make the trek from Bucks County to Kennett Square, which honestly, it's like an hour 15, something like that.
It's a ride. It's not a close trip at all.
So we get there, and we're walking up to your place, and I guess it was my daughter. She's like, "Are they open?" I'm like, "Yeah." I texted Phil. He said he's in the pizza shop because you texted me. You didn't do your show that morning. You had like a big order coming in or something, and you were at the pizza shop at 6 a.m. I'm like, "He's here. I know he's here." I'm like, "Well, no, he's not here."
It happens. You know, we were very blessed about a year and a half ago to luck into a client, a big Amazon warehouse client at our restaurant. And it's pretty far from our shop. We just happened to, through connections, land this big deal. So once a month they order like 200 to 300 pizzas, and
Wow.
I go in at 6 a.m. I bang them out, and then if it's not a Friday when they order, I just shut down for the rest of the day because I can't go in at 6 a.m. and work till 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, sure.
It's just too exhausting. I'm getting too old for that.
I think I got a few years on you, my friend.
A few.
Maybe more than a few years. The reason, and first of all, I want to tell people, I texted Phil like 10 hours ago. Okay, we're recording this on Monday night, August 19th, and I texted Phil about 10 hours before we started recording. Because I haven't, as I said at the top, I haven't done one of these for like a month. I just been really, you can relate. I've been really, really busy, and I just haven't had the time. But I'm thinking, let's see, there's no Phillies game on Monday night. It's a good time to record a podcast. Who can I get? And as you have said on your show many times, when it comes to the amount of views on this podcast, you're number 2. It's Ray Didinger, and then it's Phil Stifle. And I was talking to my son Ethan about this, who's like my producer, my technical guy. He's the brains of the operation. I don't know how to do any of this. I'm lucky I even know where the camera is. But you had more views than Larry Boa. I mean, think about that. I mean, and Larry Boa is a legend. I mean, and Larry Boa was so great, and I had a great conversation with him. But for some reason, like, our conversation just resonated with people, and I'm very appreciative of that, and it did pretty well. So I'm like, I haven't done this in a month. I got to come back strong. I got to come back with a Beardaknowledge, and thankfully,
and watch this get like 4 views total, and that's it now.
Yeah, right.
Law of averages never worked out in my favor.
Well, I mean, the reason I wanted to have you on, obviously, there's a couple. And I'm sure you talked about this morning on your show. There's a big topic going on with the Phillies, the way Rob Thomson handled the end of the game the other night. We'll get to that. There's a couple things going on with the Eagles I want to talk to you about. But you doing a morning show, and you and I have talked about this off the air. I've always thought your style and what you do, you would be great on sports radio, and one of the 2 stations in town should scoop you up and at least give you a weekend shift, man. Because I mean, and this is no disrespect to anybody on the air, because it's a difficult job to do what they do, but you're just as good as any of them. And I want to talk to you about sports radio, because there's a lot that's been happening in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks in sports radio, and I kind of wanted to pick your brain about it. First of which, and this is a guy that I've known for, over 25 years, maybe almost 25 years. I'm not going to say we're good friends by any stretch, but he's always been great to me. He's a nice guy, in my opinion. Mike Missanelli. Mike made his return to the Fanatic. It's been rumored for a while, but it still surprised me. Did it surprise you? Did you get to hear him at all? What are your thoughts?
I haven't listened to his show since he's been back on the air. I've seen some clips, I've seen some highlights, and some of the things people are talking about. I think it's really interesting that he's back on the air, because one thing you see with the Fanatic and WIP and all these radio stations is you keep hearing about all the money they're losing, and how ratings are tanking for certain stations and for certain shows, and it costs a lot of money to get Mike Missanelli back on the air. And I appreciate all the kind words you say about me, that I should be on the radio and whatnot, and I get that. But I'm a businessman, and I look at things as a business.
Sure.
And it's like, when you're dumping all the money that you got to dump into Mike Missanelli, couldn't you have gone out there and gotten 4 or 5 really good up-and-comers? Not necessarily me. There's lots of great ones out there. Could you have gotten 4 or 5 great ones, taken one step back maybe, but in the next 2 to 3 years, all of a sudden the return on that investment would be you now have 3 or 4 new guys that are, top notch. You look at where John Marks, who left WIP in the afternoon show, was a couple months ago, to just take a break, to be more time with his family and stuff like that. And, he was a guy that they took a chance on. When he got that afternoon gig, he wasn't the biggest name in the business.
Right.
He was a younger, up-and-coming guy. And they took a step back. And then after a few years, he started dominating, the ratings in the afternoon so much that even Mike Missanelli couldn't beat him in the ratings. So, I kind of look at it where, Mike Missanelli's a guy, he blocked me a long time ago on social media, guilty by association. Nothing I ever did. Use your connections, get him to unblock me. I love to clear the air with Mike Missanelli someday. But it's one of those things where, was it the right move for the Fanatic to make that kind of an investment in their midday show? And to me, that would have been an excellent opportunity for one of the young up and comers, one of the weekend guys they have on the air right now. Your ratings might not blow up in 2 minutes, but the long game is what I'm saying, kind of making a little bit of sense there. Like, I look at it as a business. If I want to hire the best pizza chef, the rest of my business might suffer because I wouldn't be able to advertise as much. Maybe I wouldn't be able to hire the best second person or third person because of that investment. So I kind of am on the fence of whether it was a right move as a business to bring Missanelli back.
Well, I'll tell you, and I totally get what you're saying, and what you're saying does make a lot of sense. The only pushback I'll give you on that is, I think Mike is the exception to that rule, only because, and this is just my opinion, you may disagree, I don't know, but, and I'm going to use the old sports radio cliche, the Mount Rushmore, okay? If I'm making a Mount Rushmore of Philly sports talk, Mike's on there. Mike's up there. Yeah. It's Mike.
Absolutely.
It's Mike. It's Howard Eskin on opposite ends of the mountain. But Mike, because they don't get along. Mike and Howard Eskin, Angelo Cataldi, and Steve Fredericks. That's my. Yep. That's remember, I don't know if you remember, Steve Fredericks was he
used to do a show with Mike Missanelli way back in the day,
on
right?
WIP.
It was an afternoon show or a morning show, I forget.
It was afternoon.
I used to listen to their show all the time back in the day.
So I think, I mean, and listen, I have no inside knowledge, okay? This is just my own personal feeling. I know nothing about the situation. I don't know the inner workings of Beasley Broadcasting, and I know Mike, but I'm not friendly enough where he would call and tell me, "Hey, Jason, guess what's going on with me?" But I mean, I like Mike and I respect Mike a lot. And again, this is just my feeling. I think the reason that he took midday, now granted the midday shift was open. I mean, they kind of opened it for him. They by firing Bob Cooney, who I thought did a really nice job, but that's another story. I kind of think he took midday because they weren't going to give him the money it would take to get him to do afternoon drive. You know what I mean? But get him on the roster, get him in the door, and and if you put him on midday, maybe in a way you affect 2 day parts because your midday numbers are going to skyrocket, and maybe you give the afternoon show enough of a lead-in that they start doing better too. So I mean, look, time will tell. Time will tell, and WIP is beating the Fanatic like a drum. So, I mean, he's really far behind.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the media I'm no media expert. You've been doing this a lot longer than I have. The fact that I've been just going at it for a few years now, but the media world has changed drastically. And yes, would it be a dream to be on the radio? Sure, but honestly, with the way like the All City team at PHLY Online, Jacob Media, all these online sites now, heck, John Marks is doing his own thing.
Yep.
On the on YouTube now as well. That's kind of opening the door, but it's also kind of hurting, the radio stations to extent, just like all the websites are hurting the newspapers, all the different outlets are hurting different people. So, it's a changing world. In the media world. And, I don't know. I don't know if it necessarily was the right move, big picture for Mike Missanelli, but I do understand the exactly why you said that, the lead in, the segues and stuff like that. I just, maybe I don't want to use the word bitter because I don't, I know I would never qualify to get that midday show, but I do know a lot of people and I've met a lot of people in this business that deserve that bigger platform. A, they might not cost as much, but B, give somebody else a chance. That there are other people. Mike Missanelli at 70 years or however old he is on the Mount Rushmore.
Upper 60s,
but does he
I think.
really need another opportunity after he's burned a lot of bridges as well? For as much as we love him and respect him, he has upset and burned a lot of bridges across his career as well.
He has, and it seemed to me like it all came to an end the first time around because he kept talking politics. And I could tell you as somebody who works in TV news that if you talk politics, you automatically alienate half your audience. That's why I never talk politics online. The closest I'll come to talking politics online is if somebody says, "Oh, the media is biased," and then I'll chime in because I work in the media and I'm not biased. Okay, watch my newscast. I'm not biased. But that was part of the issue the first time around. And again, I have no inside knowledge of this, but it seems to me like the Fanatic was kind of on its last legs, and they had to do something because. Yeah. Not only were they not catching up to WIP was increasing the lead, and I hope I explain this properly, but I know that when you see the ratings for both sports radio stations, we know it's men 25 to 54, but for some reason, and I forget why, but with WIP, it's just the radio ratings, but with the Fanatic, it's the radio and the online listening kind of tied into one number, but even though it's two forms of listening tied into one number, WIP still has like 4 times their number. So I think they kind of had to try something.
I don't know if you pay attention to the Crossing Broad, and I don't want to plug any other business or any other thing.
I do.
But the Crossing Broad, Kevin Kincaid and the company, and they do their series, the Radio Wars and stuff like that. And I love to follow it because, and their last article, which came out right after Mike Missanelli, came back. So his ratings weren't included in it. But some of the breakdowns that WIP just dominates in, like even before Spike Eskin came back and took over the afternoon show on WIP, when they were just rotating guys in for, 2 months while John Marks was out and before, Spike came in, we still were dominating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, the WIP juggernaut and, the only people that beat out WIP ever is Preston and Steve on MMR. That's the only thing that could top a WIP rating at this point. I get what you're saying with Mike Missanelli. Had to try something, a shock to the system, so to say. We'll see how it works out.
And actually, and one of the few times WIP was beaten was by Mike Missanelli in the afternoon on the Fanatic. By the way, and you mentioned John Marks, and I just want to put this out there. I exchanged messages with John earlier tonight, and John will be on a future Philly Sports Convo, probably in the next couple of weeks. He'll be episode 21. So that should be pretty cool. So
I'm working on John Marks for trending in the AM as well. Not to steal your thunder, but we've exchanged messages.
Hey, listen, man.
I'm working on that one as well. I respect John Marks immensely from where he came.
As do I.
Doing Saturday mornings with Sean Brace, who does 102.9 the Fox the Gambler.
Yeah.
The two of them started as just the fill-in guys. I think they were both Mike Missanelli's producers at one point. I know John was.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So the career path that John Marks has taken, and John Marks, out of all of them in media, he has never had that baseless hot take, clickbait attitude. He literally does things kind of sort of the way I do. Sets the tone for the show, brings up a couple topics, whatever you want to talk about, he talks about it, and he does it really well. And he's one of the few that I think actually is listening to his listeners when he's out there on the radio.
Oh, I totally agree. I've always been a fan of John's, and I was pleasantly surprised when he responded and said, "Yeah, I'd love to come on your podcast." I've never met the man. I mean, we've been connected on social media, but I've never met John. But he seems like a great guy, and as I said, I've always respected his career. So I'm looking forward to having him on. And that was a shock when he left WIP, but I give him credit because he did it because he wanted to spend time with his family. I know he just recently hooked on with Bet Parks. He's doing stuff with them, and he's got his own YouTube channel. So it should be interesting to talk to John. And I hope you get him too. I know you had Joe Giglio on a little while back, and I honestly, full disclosure, I did not get a chance to hear that conversation. Talk about that. That must have been cool having him on.
No, Joe Giglio was great. I know Joe Giglio from the, some of the hot take things that he sometimes puts out there to get clicks, to help get the views. And I crush people for having hot takes all the time, but I get and understand why people do it, to get those clicks, because it is such a competitive thing. But the thing with Joe Giglio that I loved so much, when I made the switch from my previous network to Edge of Philly, I've never interacted with Joe Giglio on a regular basis. We're not friends. We've never met. He saw my post saying I was switching from my previous brand to Edge of Philly Sports, and he reached out to me and said, "Congratulations on the move. Great work. I've seen your climb that you've been slowly doing. So when someone in Joe Giglio's shoes
That's very
is
cool.
reaching out to me, when you send me positive, it really does. Validation does help.
Listen,
When you're grinding
I'm not on the
away
level of Joe
on a
Giglio.
regular basis. What's that?
I said I am not on the level of Joe Giglio, but I appreciate you saying that. But no, that's really cool that he did that.
Help. When you're trying to make a name for yourself, hearing that validation. And Joe did not have to reach out to me. He'd never messaged me before. He's never responded to a single, one of my posts. When he did that, it felt pretty good. And so then I started chit-chatting with him, on a regular basis and getting him to come on, talk Phillies, which he's a big Phillies guy. He's a big Phillies fan. He talks Phillies nonstop on his show. It was really good to do. And he gave me some really solid answers. We discussed, we debated a little bit, and it was good. It was a good thing to have that, kind of validation to an extent.
That's very cool. That's very well. Listen, Matt. It seems like you are little by little making that climb up the ladder. And as somebody on the outside looking in, and I'm a fan of yours, it's really cool to see. It's very cool to see. You're going about it the right way, man.
Yeah, I'm trying. Sometimes I get into these little grooves where I lose a little focus. I get a little, off topic. Today was not a good day for me on social media with my Phillies takes and my Rob Thomson takes. But you take those in stride, and you ignore the trolls, you ignore the haters out there, and you just keep. You got to have a vision. You got to have a goal. And I always tell everybody, whether it's at the pizza shop, whether it's in life, whether it's in podcasting, you got to look at yourself in the mirror every day. And you got to be happy with who you see. Yep. And that's kind of what I do. And I make sure that I'm never embarrassed by what I put out there. And having the pizza shop makes it so much more important, because I can't go out there and say crazy things that might affect the pizza shop.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what pays the bills. This does not pay the bill. The pizza shop does. So, and I have had people come into the pizza shop and recognize me from the shows. I've had people come into the pizza shop and start following my shows. So I can never let what I do on social media, sports content wise.
Right.
It's just like you don't want to talk politics. I can't talk anything that would ever come back and bite me in the rear because of what I said on social media.
That makes sense. You mentioned your Rob Thomson takes, and I want to get to that in a second, but there's one more sports radio thing I want to get to. And at this point, it's like a month in the rearview mirror, but I'm still the whole Howard Eskin situation shocked me. And I don't mean the fact. Well, okay, I guess I do mean the fact that it happened. I mean, again, and I don't know Howard well. I bumped into him a couple of times here and there through the years. I used to work at B101, which is in the same building as WIP, so I would see him occasionally on a Saturday morning, and he was always really nice to me. Always a hell of a nice guy. When he was at Channel 29 back in the 80s, I don't know if I ever told you this, Phil, I wrote a letter to him when I was in 7th grade, like an actual letter, like with pen and paper. I wrote a letter. Just, I'm a big fan. I want to be a broadcaster when I grow up. He sent me an autographed picture. I still have that picture, a Channel 29 10 o'clock news picture. And I posted that on Twitter a couple years ago, right when Sports Scene was starting. And I posted that picture because I just stumbled across it. And he gave me the nicest response. So it's like, when I hear this about him, it's like, God, he seems like such a nice guy. Like, what? But that being said, it shocked the hell out of me that WIP didn't talk about it. They said nothing about it. They didn't talk on the air about it outside of a quick statement from Spike, who was in an awful position. I felt bad for him. And then when Eskin finally came back to his Saturday show, he gave, and I hate to say it, I mean no disrespect to the man, but he gave kind of a half-hearted apology and said, I'm not talking about it anymore, and then that was it. I just thought the whole thing was handled poorly. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much stole every line I could probably say there about it, because I do think it was handled poorly. No, it's okay. I mean, but I love how you just popped your face back in there just to say you're sorry. That was throwing me off a little bit there. But it's funny because I'm gonna bring another story into the conversation here, and it's with the Elliott Shore Parks, who's also on WIP.
Yeah. And
his situation with the Deshaun Jackson, article from many, many years ago, the gang ties and stuff like that. And when Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy started a podcast this year, it was one of the topics was brought up of bringing that story up again. And Elliott Shore Parks, who was back then not as big as he is now, has not commented at one time on it. He hasn't said a thing. WIP hasn't said a thing. They haven't, they haven't suspended. Nothing's happened with that. The fact that Spike Eskin said something, whether it was half-hearted or not, whether it was honest or truthful or not, tells me also that WIP isn't stopping ESP from saying anything
Right.
about his situation. Now, on the Spike or the Howard Eskin part of it, I don't know if I'm necessarily shocked on how he answered it, because I truly don't like, and this is, again, I respect the guy. He's one of the legends. He might be on that Mount Rushmore of sports talk people of all time. But, I'm not shocked that I don't think he thinks he did anything really wrong. Does that make sense? Like, I don't think he thinks that he didn't expect it to blow up, become a big deal.
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
Had no choice but to kick him out of Citizens Bank Park. The Sixers followed suit. The Eagles he works for, they didn't do anything about it. WIP wasn't. They gave him like a little 2-week vacation, basically. I think it was 2 to 3 weeks he was off the air. And that was pretty much it. And he made his little statement and moved on. But I think if they were going to let him say something bigger had to be said. You know what I mean?
I agree.
The station needed to follow up his statement. If one of my employees goes out there and offends somebody or sexually harass somebody or whatever, yeah, they're going to get fired. Yeah, they're going to, they're going to have to say something. They're going to face it. But I'm going to have to comment on it as well.
Sure.
That we don't accept that kind of thing here. If you at PHL 17 did something similar, you would have been out of a job pretty much immediately.
I'd be fired.
You know what I mean?
No
you
doubt.
would have had to make statements. PHL 17 would have made statements. So what makes Howard Eskin so much different? And I don't understand. And maybe it goes to the thing where it's still ratings. He still draws ratings, in his Saturday morning time slot. I don't know. But again, what did I say before? You got to be able to look yourself in the mirror. And I don't know how the people in charge letting Howard Eskin go so easily look themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very well said. You said that they gave him a slap on the wrist because he wasn't on the air for a few weeks, but they never came out and said he was suspended. Right. I think the first weekend they said it was a vacation. Then the next weekend it was when Glenn Macnow was retiring, so they didn't want to overshadow Glenn's last show. And then the weekend after that, he still wasn't on. They didn't give a reason for that. I assumed it was because it was the new Mike Sealski and Rob Ellis show. He didn't want to, overshadow that. Then he came back the following week. I don't know, man. I just, and Angelo could, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just don't understand how they could get away with it, because again, like I said, anything that you would have done, anything I would have done, heck, Mike Missanelli has said and done things wrong even.
Yeah,
and he's gotten fired, suspended.
Yes, he has.
And, I still remember when Mike Missanelli had his blow up with Tyron Johnson, where he threw his helmet or his headset at the screen, stormed off. Even he had to give a more detailed apology than Howard Eskin. What kind of power does Howard Eskin really have behind the scenes where he can get away with that? I don't know. And I think it's kind of wrong. And it's kind of one of those things that makes, would I love a show on WIP? Sure. It would be a dream come true. But also, would I want to associate with people that, to an extent, allow that kind of behavior to be part of their workforce? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And I may have just shot myself in the foot if someone listening from WIP listens to this and hears that, and then they'll never give me a shot. But you know what I'm getting at. You got to, you gotta have some standards.
Yeah,
and
you're
I don't know. The fact they let him say a little bit, it should have been nothing, or it should have been more from the station.
It should have been more, because the apology he gave, he just said, "I'm sorry that it happened." He never said I was wrong.
Exactly.
And that's what bothered me about it. There's I think by and large this is a very forgiving society. There's nothing wrong with going on the air, even after something like that, and say, you know what, I was wrong. I misread the situation, and I thought there was, I thought what I was doing was okay, but it was, just even if you sugarcoat it like that, but you admit that you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying I'm wrong and I'm sorry. And this is a very forgiving society, I think. And honestly, when people do that, I think it makes them more respectable. And when they obviously don't do that, it makes them less respectable. And that's why it shocks me, because, for all of Howard Eskin's faults, he's been through the years, he's been gruff, he's been caustic with callers. Like you said, he's a legend, and he's always worked his ass off. One thing you can't say is that he's not a hard worker, and he will insult a player on the air, but then be in the locker room that night and be with that player face to face. He doesn't avoid confrontation. He doesn't, just hide behind a microphone. That's all respectable. But I think the way he handled this and the way the station handled it is not respectable at all. And it does surprise me. It really does.
I mean, so I don't listen. Let me preface this. I very rarely listen to the radio anymore.
Really?
I got
Okay.
a 20-minute drive to work every day. I don't, I'm a big music person. I take my 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night, listening to music. But I did listen to, I do listen to the Phillies games sometimes when they're on the way home. So I got into my car. I don't know if it was this past Saturday or the Saturday before. And I guess it had been still set to 94.1 for a Phillies game on the ride home, and Howard Eskin was on. And so I'm like, you know what? I haven't listened to Eskin since his half-hearted apology. Let me just leave it on for a few minutes. The first caller he talked to, I don't even remember what the topic was about. He just laid into him, called him an idiot, said, your opinion's useless. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, I don't think that flies anymore.
Yeah.
And that's 110% contradictory of what I try to be and what the people I respect try to be. And I'm like, instantly, right? He could have re-won me back as a listener, but instead instantly, it was an instant click right back over to Sirius XM and right back to whatever else was on the radio, because I don't think that flies anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, because I have so many fond memories of growing up with my father, who passed away when I was pretty young, listening to the radio. We would drive around on Saturday mornings, delivering newspapers, listening to the, middle of the night people, early Saturday morning, Stan Hochman. I always loved listening to Stan Hochman on Saturday mornings, listening to the WIP afternoon show on the way home from school with him. There were so many great memories in my car. A lot of them are centered around Mike Missanelli and Howard Eskin. And I think my dad right now would be embarrassed to know what Howard Eskin has turned into in the media world with his personality.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what's so cool about radio and about sports radio. We all have so many memories. I mean, I remember, and it's funny, I remember listening to Howard Eskin with my dad and my grandfather. Now, way back, Howard Eskin used to be on an FM station. It was 96.5, which is, I guess, like a top 40 station now. Ironically owned by the same company that owns WIP. But it was an FM talk station. The call letters were WWDB. And Eskin did a weekly, I want to say it was maybe every Friday afternoon, a weekly sports talk show. This was like late 70s, early 80s, so before WIP was all sports. There were WWDB had a sports talk show. 12:10 a.m. Was WCAU back in the day. They were a talk station. Steve Fredericks had a show called The Sports Line every night. So there were sports talk shows on talk stations, but there wasn't sports radio yet. And I remember listening to Eskin when I was a kid. And Stan Hochman, that brought back some good memories, man. That's a name from the past.
That's Stan Hochman voice when he would talk. And he would be talking about, he was a big boxing guy. He loved talking fights.
Well, he was in Rocky.
That's right. He was in Rocky. I didn't even think of that off the top of my head. And I'm thinking music. You talk about memories in sports, but also in radio in general. I can't remember who was the host of the show. I have fond memories of being in my grandmom's kitchen on Sunday morning, Sundays with Sinatra. Who was the host of Sundays with Sinatra back then? Sid Mark. My grandma, she taught me how to dance to Sundays with Sinatra's with Sid Mark. That is how I learned how to dance. And she would sit there in the kitchen and sing Frank Sinatra while she was making the Sunday, spaghetti dinner and stuff like that. And so the memories that sports talk or radio in general bring back is great. But then also you got to think times have changed. These long veteran, media people need to change with the times to an extent, and they don't. And it's kind of sad to say.
Yeah, wow, that's another great name from the past, man. Sid Mark.
Yeah, man.
Sundays
with Sinatra.
Sunday with Sinatra.
Guaranteed every Sunday in my in grandma's kitchen every Sunday morning.
Well, he had two shows. There was a show for a while. He had a Friday show and a Sunday show. It was Friday with Frank and Sunday with Sinatra. And I don't know if I ever shared this with you. Sinatra is like my all-time favorite singer. I love Sinatra. He's the one person I didn't get to see live that I regret not getting to see live, and he's the one person, if he were still around, there aren't many people that if money was no object, I would pay any amount of money for. He's one of them. He's definitely one of them.
Absolutely agree with you. I would 1,000. I would sell my house to have a chance to sit down and listen to him perform live. I mean, it would have been a dream come true. But
absolutely,
it's still, memories were based for us older generation around the radio.
Yep.
I mean, TV too, but my grandma's house, growing up, in the late 80s, early 90s. It's not like she didn't have cable TV. She lived on a one-way street in Upper Darby. You know, it wasn't the greatest of neighborhoods at that point still already. You know, you learned, you listened, you know, and music and the people on the radio are what taught you about everything. You can even go old school TV. I don't listen to, you know, NBC 10 or Fox News anymore. But I have so many fond memories of listening to Gary Papa on 6 ABC and Jim Gardner and those guys. They were in my household every night after dinner. But times have changed. Again, some of these people have not changed with the times. And that's where we're getting some of these problems with Howard Eskin, some of these problems with ratings on the Fanatic or whatnot, where they got to make big, bold moves and bring back someone like Mike Missanelli. Because the stations, the announcers, the people in charge, the people on the air, they're not changing with the times.
They're not changing with the times, and unfortunately, radio is not the way it was. You know, back at the time that you and I were just talking about, radio is like, it's like night and day, and it has not changed for the better. And all the wounds in radio are self-inflicted, but that's another conversation for another time. But we're getting off the beaten track here. But you mentioned Gary Papa, and I got to mention this. Did you ever get a chance to meet him before he passed away?
No, I did not. I mean, I feel like I knew him from watching him every single night, but no, I did not get to meet him.
So I met him one time, and it was so. Actually, let me backtrack here. It was 2008, I guess, Father's Day 2008. I was at Ben FM, all right? And every year, and I think they still have it, it's the Gary Papa Run on Father's Day at the Art Museum for I guess for prostate cancer research. And you know, he was kind of in the throes of prostate cancer at that point, so they organized the Gary Papa Run. My station was the co-sponsor, so I got to MC it. So I got to introduce Gary Papa. And so we met, you know, we talked beforehand, and I think, you know, I actually did some stuff on Channel 6 back in the day. He remembered me. I mean, I never met the man because I did traffic on Channel 6, and this was before the traffic reporter was in the studio. I was in a totally different building, didn't work with any of them, you know, face-to-face, didn't really know them, even though we were on the same newscast. Gary Papa remembered me, and he says to me, you know, I'm a big fan of your work. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I grew up watching you, man. You're awesome. And introducing him was one of the biggest thrills of my career. And this was when his cancer was kind of in remission. His hair had grown back. He was the picture of health. He looked amazing. But long story short, by the next Father's Day, he was already gone. He took a major turn for the worse. But the guy that you saw on television, just from my limited dealings with him, that's who he was off the air too. Great guy.
Absolutely. That's a great story. I love that.
All right. I want to talk some sports with you before I let you go. God, we've talked a long time about.
We've said this before. We could do a 3-hour show together. That's why you should be using your connections. Get us an afternoon or a weekend show on the radio. Me and you, we could go for 4 hours, no problem, on a Saturday or Sunday.
I would love that. The Jason and Phil. I'm sorry, the Phil and Jason show.
Jason and Phil. Age before beauty. Age before beauty always.
I will tell you, after the last podcast we did together, my son Ethan said to me, he's like, "You guys are good together." So there you go. There you go. And I agree. I mean, you're right. We can talk for hours. But you know, you mentioned earlier about your takes on Rob Thomson, and I want to get to that because obviously I don't get to watch your show as often as I'd like to because I'm also at work when you're doing your show. Every once in a while, if I have the morning off, I'll chime in and I'll give you a comment. But the whole thing with Rob Thomson the other day, not pinch hitting for Cal Stevenson and or Garrett Stubbs, and look, that's not to say that they would have won the game. I mean, he could have put Bryce Harper up there, and Bryce Harper could have hit in a double play too. You never know. But you got to give yourself the best chance to win. And I'm hearing, and it's funny, the guy we were just talking about, Mike Missanelli. Missanelli today on the air said, I totally understand what Rob Thomson did. You know, if you're supposed to get a day off, you're supposed to get a day off. Seriously? You can't go up and swing the bat a couple times? What was your take on that?
Well, first off, so I saw the Mike Missanelli clip you were talking about, and the other guy, Bill, I can't remember his last name, that's on the show with him there.
Colarulo.
Yeah, there you go. Was more on my side, and I don't know if you caught this. The Phillies post game show on WIP. I don't know who hosted it Sunday night. I forget who hosted it. They had former Philly legend trivia. You're a trivia host. He's the answer to a great trivia question. A former Philly that was in town for alumni weekend called into the show. Steve Jeltz. I don't know if you remember Steve Jeltz.
Yeah,
He called in
well,
and
okay.
he said, "Everyone's." Oh, go ahead.
Steve Jeltz. Do you know the trivia question about Steve Jeltz?
Home run from both sides of the plate.
Exactly. Impressive, my friend. All right, keep
One
going.
of my childhood memories right
Yes.
there. I pride myself on really, really useless Phillies knowledge, and that's one of my pieces of useless knowledge.
That's a great one.
He called in, and he said he's going to hear people say, well, you need to, if you tell them they're going to have a day off, they need to have their whole day off. And Steve Jeltz said on that call-in that pinch hitting does not really affect your day off. It's not going to put any extra wear and tear on your body. You still had to prepare in case of an injury or whatever would happen to be in the game. So you're already stretched. You're already in the flow. You've been in the dugout the entire game. Pinch hitting wouldn't have affected that day off. And that was the first thing that validated me. When I saw that he did not pinch hit for him, for either of those guys, I knew exactly what Rob Thomson's answer was going to be, because Rob Thomson, he reads from a cliche book, kind of like Nick Sirianni, but just in different manner. I knew exactly what his answer was going to be. I promised him a day off. I was getting him a full day off. And Rob Thomson is so predictable in these situations. Look, Rob Thomson, my opinion's to backtrack a little bit. He's a career bench coach. He caught lightning in a bottle in 2022. I took so much flack. I thought it was going to be the end of my very beginning of my podcast career when I said that it should not be a lock that he gets the 2023 full-time job.
Wow.
Because again, he didn't want to coach, period, in 2022. He was ready to retire before the 2022 season.
Yep.
Joe Girardi convinced him to come back. He took over for Joe Girardi and whatnot. And I know the Phillies have a great record. I know things most of the year have gone well. They've hit a little bit of a speed bump for about 2 months there, a month and a half there. Rob Thomson's a great manager when everything is going right. Rob Thomson does not know how to change a switch like Larry Bow. You've had Larry Bow on this show many of times. He doesn't have that ability to switch his personality. And I don't know if the players would respond to him. They look at him as Uncle Rob or the dad of the locker room. And I don't know if in today's day and age you can be like that 100% of the time. And, you can't tell me that Bryce Harper didn't want to be in. I bet you Bryce Harper was kind of pissed off to an extent that he didn't get an opportunity in that ninth inning of the game.
I agree.
In the current baseball, first two seeds in the East, each side, the National League and the American League, get that first round wild card bye. That bye is very important for a team like the Phillies that are banged up, that their pitching is getting a little tired. If we miss first round bye by one game, this is one of the many moments you can go back to where Rob Thomson does not know how to pivot from what his original game plan is. The Eagles last year, they were really bad defensively in the first half, and they would have to pivot and make adjustments at halftime and come out and play different defense in the second half. Rob Thomson does not know how to do that. He does not know how to manage a bullpen properly. I could ramble on and on for hours about this, but what I will say is Phillies fans have become soft in comparison to Eagles fans. If Nick Sirianni loses one game, it's fire Nick Sirianni. All of last year's failures from the Eagles, all Nick Sirianni's fault. But for some reason, Phillies fans give Rob Thomson a pass. Doesn't matter if we lose 3 games, 10 games, we go 3-18 or whatever. It's not Rob Thompson's fault. It's the player's fault. And I don't understand why so many fans give him such a pass.
You really think that's the case? You really think most fans give him a pass?
I think so. Based off of my interactions today alone on social media, just because I question Rob Thomson, tells me that it wasn't Rob Thompson's fault for not pinch hitting there. It was Cal Stevenson's fault. It was Matt Strahm in the 6th inning for giving up a run. It was his fault. It was Taijuan Walker's fault for not pitching a good game as the starter. It was Garrett Stubbs' fault. It was everybody else's fault on Sunday but Rob Thomson's, according to the fans I spoke to.
So you're telling me your audience had no problem with Cal Stevens going up with Bryce Harper on the bench, and a day off the next day. I mean,
The majority didn't have a problem with it.
That's astounding to me. Okay, let me ask you this then. Okay,
Because just think about that Eagles season last year.
Mm.
How disastrous it ended. You can't tell me how many people wanted Nick Sirianni out of this city. But Rob Thomson, and everyone says, well, Rob Thomson got us to a World Series 2 years ago, right? Yes, absolutely. Nick Sirianni got us to a Super Bowl 2 years ago.
he did.
It's a different scenario. And it's really weird. There's this divide forming, between Eagles and Sixers fans and what they criticize. And, people were saying it was a scheduled loss for the Phillies on Sunday. Well, we hate it when Doc Rivers actually said that it was a scheduled loss and, whatever, a few years ago. The Sixers and Eagles fans, they're so critical. But Phillies fans, it's a long season. One game doesn't matter. Rob Thomson this, it's really kind of frustrating to me because I try to call it down the middle in my content, but no, I don't even want to criticize Rob Thomson, but no one will. So I kind of feel like I have to be that guy that will take a stand that Rob Thompson's not the perfect manager.
Well, I will tell you, I know two people who support you on that, okay? Because I get into arguments all the time with my parents. My mom and dad are two of the biggest sports fans I know, and every time I talk to them, do you see what Thompson did last night? He's a terrible manager. And I will say to you, and this was before, not pinch hitting for Stevenson. Usually I'll say, okay, well, this is why he did it. Okay, or in my opinion, this is why he did it. I mean, look, he got to the World. I said all the things you just said. He took us to the World Series in 22. He took over for Joe Girardi. The team was 22-29, and then they went to the World Series. You got to take that into consideration. They just think he's a terrible manager. So I'll ask you. You said that he's a great manager when things are going great. Overall, is he a great manager, a good manager, a bad manager? What do you think?
Good man, and that's it. He's just a good manager. Another little example I give everyone's like, well, last year's season got ruined because Craig Kimbrell blew it in the playoffs. Well, who overpitched Craig Kimbrell last year in the playoffs, leading up to the playoffs? Last year, I forget the stats. It's been a while since I thought about this, but Craig Kimbrell's had a Hall of Fame career. He's pitched in majors for 15 plus years.
Yep.
Last year was the most innings he's pitched in his career in over 10 years.
Wow, didn't know that.
At that point of his career, he shouldn't. Might have been 8 years, 10 years, something like that. Don't quote me on the exact year, but if you go through his career, you'll see innings pitched most in a long time for him. That was Rob Thomson going to him. Rob Thomson knew he was gassed by the time we got to the playoffs. Still put him out there every single inning in the ninth inning, no matter what.
Right.
Rob Thomson doesn't even believe in a closer. Like, he likes the closer by committee. But when he got stuck on something, he's creature of habit, Rob Thomson.
Well,
he doesn't know how to break what he thinks is right. And it is what he's a great guy. I'd love for him to find success. I would love for a Phillies World Series win under him.
Sure.
He could change my opinion with one World Series victory. I know that, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, no, to your point, that was a glaring mistake last season, always going back to Kimbrell. And it reminded me, and I don't know how old you were in 1993. How old were you in 1993?
I was born in 19. I would have turned 13 just after the World Series.
Okay. So do you remember the 93 World Series?
Like as clear as can be.
So you know what I'm going to say? Jim Fregosi kept going back to Mitch Williams, even though Mitch Williams had nothing left in the tank. He was done. All right? Roger Mason is pitching the 8th inning in Game 6. He takes Mason out, puts Williams in. We know what happened. I still can't watch the Joe Carter home run. Like when MLB Network shows like the greatest postseason home runs, that's always on there. I always have to turn the TV off. I cannot watch it. But that may be an extreme example, but that kind of reminds me of what Thompson did with Kimbrell last year. Always going back to the closer no matter what. And that's part of why it's like, I don't know. To me, the best managers manage by feel. You don't always go by the book. You don't go by analytics all the time. You go by your gut feeling. The best managers do that, I think.
Absolutely agree with you. And baseball is becoming a massively analytic sport. And maybe Rob Thomson doesn't manage quite as analytically as like a Gabe Kapler did back when he was the manager before Joe Girardi here. But he still does go by what the book tells him to do far too often. someone like Brandon Marsh, and again, Brandon Marsh has struggled the last, couple weeks of the season. I think he's a little banged up right now. But Brandon Marsh, quote unquote, can't hit lefties. You traded a top prospect for him. You brought him in here. He's a young up and comer. He can't get better against lefties if you don't at least give him a shot. Yet you have somebody like last year, Kyle Schwarber, who was terrible batting average, whatever, plays every day, even against the lefties. But the book says that Brandon Marsh can't play against lefties, so we're just never going to play Brandon Marsh when a lefty's on the mound. Sometimes you got to have a little feel. Brandon Marsh's energy that he brings to the team when he's on the field, when he's up to bat, can help affect the game, even if he strikes out. So,
good point.
There's certain things where Rob Thomson, he's just sticking to the book. He's sticking to the game plan. He's not changing the game plan. We're just lucky that the Phillies have a $300 billion payroll and so many massively talented players. I know this, again, this is another thing that gets me so much trouble. We win despite Rob Thomson sometimes because of the massive amount of talent that is on this team.
I can't argue that point. I wish I could, but I can't. All right, talking about the bullpen. How worried are you about this bullpen? I mean, because they all seem to be crumbling at the worst time. Estevez blows the save Friday night. Sunday, Strahm had his troubles. Hoffman's been having his troubles. Alvarado is Alvarado. He hasn't been right in a long time. What happens? I mean, you can't go into the postseason with a shaky bullpen like that. And you would think with all those names, it shouldn't be that shaky.
I gotta hope that these guys like Strahm and Hoffman, those guys, the guys that have been here for a while, they're just leveling out a little bit and they're just hitting a little speed bump. You've got to hope that. I mean, Hoffman and Strahm are still sub 2.5 ERAs at this point when we're recording this. So, they've had some bumps in the road, but it's not like they've gone 3-4 weeks of really bad, pitching. You just hope they're leveling out. I am concerned a little bit about Estevez because, I mean, he was pitching, in a city in Los Angeles with the Angels that has no playoff aspirations whatsoever. And he was having like a kind of a blip on the radar, like elite season that he never had before. Can he keep it up here with the pressure of Philadelphia? That concerns me a little bit right there. But outside of that, I hope the bullpen settles down. What I think will happen, you've got to hope that you can rely on Wheeler and Nola to be healthy for the playoffs, that they can give you 6 to 7 innings, and that Rob Thomson, with feel, not analytics, can piecework that 8th and 9th inning to the best of his ability. Something that I think that could happen. And I don't know if this is going to happen. This is just a gut feeling. In 2022, someone left the rotation and really was successful in the bullpen for the playoff push, and that was Ranger Suarez. Now, Ranger Suarez has been on the shelf with some arm fatigue and injury. I don't know. They've called it a bunch of different things. When he comes back, he's obviously going to start some games. There's only 6 weeks left. You've got Christopher Sanchez that's still pitching really well out of the the starting rotation. You might see some Ranger Suarez in the bullpen down the stretch and maybe in the playoffs just to kind of, you can get by with 3 starters, in the playoffs, depending on the situation. If you get that first round bye, you definitely could survive just 3 starters for a little bit, in the playoffs. So maybe they do that to help piece that bullpen together. Maybe they move Ranger Suarez there. It's kind of a crazy idea because he has been one of our best starters, but his arm's a little tired.
Right.
Maybe a little bit less in that situation. And I just remember how clutch he was out of that pen in 2022.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, he's a guy I wouldn't, if they were going to do that, he's a guy I wouldn't mind seeing them do that with. I'm always a little leery about putting a starter in the bullpen because I remember in, I guess it was the 2007 Division Series when the Phillies got swept by the Rockies. I was at Game 1, and Colorado had the bases loaded, and I forget who was in the bullpen back then, but I know Myers was the closer, but I forget who came before him. But there were issues with the bullpen. So Kyle Loesch, one of the starters, Charlie Manuel brought him into the game out of the pen and brought him in with the bases loaded, and he immediately served up a grand slam home run. And, the analysis after the game, and I never thought about this, but it was a great point. A starter is not used to coming into a game with the bases loaded. They're used to coming into a clean inning. But the fact that Rangers got got that bullpen experience and in the playoffs, if they were going to do that, he's the one. Yeah, they would have to do it with him.
It's not an ideal situation. In an ideal world, he would be the game 3 starter of a playoff series. But if you can't get these guys right, if it's not a blip on the radar with Strahm and Hoffman, because let's be honest, Matt Strahm has been fantastic this year up to the last couple of weeks. I was talking a couple of weeks ago on my show how Jeff Hoffman might be one of the most sought-after relievers on the free agent market after this season.
You're right.
He's earned – I don't know if you know Jeff Hoffman's story. I mean, he has been demoted and designated for assignment like literally 471.2 times in his career.
No, I didn't know that.
It's insane. And he has battled and battled to get this opportunity. And he's done darn well for the last year and change with the Phillies. And he's really built up a great reputation. You just got to hope that it's a blip on the radar for those guys. And I really, truly think those two, it is a blip on the radar. I think Alvarado is a little bit more of a head case. And I think that's something that needs to be dealt with in the offseason, not in the middle of the season. You can't trust him. But
I agree.
Strahm, Hoffman, Estevez, I guess Tanner Scott to an extent, Orion Kirkgreen, who's had a bump in the radar here or bump here or there. You hope he settles down a little bit. You still got six arms there that you could count on in the playoffs. So hopefully Ranger Suarez isn't needed. Hopefully he can get healthy. Yeah. Again, he's had that opportunity and he succeeded in there. I think in that Braves series in 2022, didn't he start a game and come out of the pen twice in that series?
I believe he did. Yeah.
He was bouncing around and doing a little bit of everything in that series. So I could see a scenario like that again.
Yeah, that's versatility. Yeah, the shame of it is, talk about Alvarado. When he's on, man, he's filthy. When he's on, he is unhittable. But when he is off, I mean, you talk about somebody who runs hot and cold. He really runs hot and cold. And right now, he is ice cold. And you're right. It might take till after the season to try to get him right, and it's a shame because he could be an asset out of the pen if he was right. I want to just ask you a couple Eagles questions because I know when we talked about this earlier, I said, it'll be like 45 minutes we'll talk. It's already been about an hour. A lot of talk about the Eagles' backup quarterback. And, I know there are people who say, and they're right, but there are people who say, well, it doesn't matter. If we get to the backup, we're in trouble anyway. But you don't have to look back too far to see an example of when the backup quarterback really means something in this town. So, Pickett, McKee, who do you think? Who do you like?
I got an interesting scenario on how it's going to go.
Okay.
Kenny Pickett is going to be quarterback 2 on this football team for the Philadelphia Eagles. He is going to be the backup to Jalen Hurts, no doubt about it, in my opinion, on game day when Jalen Hurts is starting. What's not going to happen, though, is that if Jalen Hurts gets hurt for an extended period of time, I think if start a clean game. So Jalen Hurts, say, gets hurt week 7 in the middle of the game. Kenny Pickett comes in. He's experienced. He's 14-10 in his last 2 seasons as a starter in Pittsburgh. He knows how to come into games, come out of games, because he's been benched multiple times. He knows how to play that role. But I think Tanner McKee is the better quarterback. And I think the Eagles know that. So then say the next week, when Jalen Hurts isn't able to play from the get-go, Tanner McKee will be bumped up to the quarterback 1, will start, and Kenny Pickett will still serve in the backup role. If Tanner McKee can't handle, the starting job like we think he can, I think Kenny Pickett is going to stay in that backup role throughout the entire season and only pinch hit when necessary. If Jalen Hurts needs the day off, that's Tanner McKee's opportunity. That's kind of how I'm thinking about this whole process.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That is damn good analysis, Phil. That makes a lot of sense.
It's not an analysis. It's just an opinion. And I have no sources. I have nothing but just 43 years of football knowledge, and that's just what I'm guessing is going to be the way it plays out. Howie hates being wrong. That's one thing about Howie Roseman. He doesn't like being wrong. He traded what's amounting to a 4th-round pick for Kenny Pickett. He doesn't want to admit that he was wrong on the Kenny Pickett trade. So he is going to make Kenny Pickett the quarterback too. But, week 7, week 8, if Jalen Hurts needed a game off, you might see Tanner McKee because in those 2 preseason games, Tanner McKee looked head and shoulders better than Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, no
in
doubt.
This new offense from Dale Moore.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, Phil, my friend, I've kept you long enough, but that is the kind of analysis and opinion that you get every weekday morning on Trending in the AM. Tell folks how and when and where they can consume your show, because as someone who watches the show and every chance I get, it's a damn good show.
Appreciate that. Trending in the AM is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9:30 on the Edge of Philly Sports Network. Just go onto YouTube or Facebook, type in Edge of Philly Sports or type in Trending in the AM. I should pretty much come up all the time in the morning for that. I also do a great golf show on Tuesday nights called Fairway to Heaven, 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. Actually, next week is the last week of that because the golf season ends.
That's a great
next
name.
week. So I do that one as well. The original Fairway to Heaven, not the copycat from Live Golf Network. Anytime I can throw that dig in there, I will. But if you can't find me that way, find me on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter at Beardaknowledge, and that's where I share everything out on there as well.
Yeah. Now, listen, I'm a big fan of Phil's, and I think anybody who hasn't checked this show out should. Before I let you go, and I probably asked you this before, but I don't remember, the Harry Kalas picture that you have up there. Where did you get that? I love that.
It's fantastic. So it's his face. It's him. The drawing of him is the words of High Hopes. So someone wrote the words of High Hopes.
No way.
In the shape of Harry Kalas. And my brother, two of my favorite, that there and my Doctober thing. My brother, he for extra money, he shops at thrift stores and resells the stuff online. He found that at a thrift store for $5 and gave it to me as a present. And it is literally my pride and joy. Harry Kalas, an idol to me. I mean, I still think about him every time I watch a Phillies game, and I love what Tom McCarthy does, and I think Tom McCarthy gets a bad rap. That could be a whole show right there. But whenever I hear Tom McCarthy, John Kruk, and whatever, I think of Harry Kalas all the time. I think of Harry Kalas and Richie Ashburn and Andy Musser and all those guys, and what it was like, again, kind of full circle story with this episode here, the way we learned from the radio and the TV back in the day, and Harry Kalas is one of the greatest of all time.
Listen, Harry Kalas is one of the reasons I wanted to get into broadcasting, and I think you and I could probably just do a show about Phillies broadcasting and local broadcasting because, yeah, Harry Kalas, Richie Ashburn, Andy Musser, Chris Wheeler. I mean, you talk about just great stuff growing up and great Phil. Even if the baseball wasn't great, the broadcast was still great. I mean, you're right. I mean, McCarthy and Kruk are kind of have the Harry and Whitey dynamic, but I think even more so, Fransky and LA have the Harry and Whitey dynamic. Those guys are phenomenal. All right, Fox's Pizza Den in Kennett Square location.
345 Scarlet Road, Kennett Square. You know what? Mention that you watched this episode. Come on out, and I'll buy you a slice of pizza to anybody that watches it.
All right, I'm going to come out to your place, but I'm going to call first. To make sure you're there. Hey, listen, Phil, I love you, buddy. I mean, I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. I appreciate it because I asked you last minute, and you came through for me as you always do, and I appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, that's what I got. Sorry, I'm a little congested today. Allergies are kicking my butt, but anytime I can come on here and chat with you, I will. And I always know, no matter whether you say 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I always know it's going to be at least an hour because the two of us, I think we could do this every day and have no problems with it.
I think we could. Thanks, Phil. We'll talk soon, bud. Okay. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening to the Philly Sports Convo, episode 20. We'll catch you soon for episode 21. Thanks, everybody.